Hello and welcome everyone to the fifth A List Apart on-air event. Our goal for these events is to provide a space for some deep expert discussions alongside some more casual Q&A for the audience, kind of like a meetup without all the hassles of geography. I guess that makes all of us in here right now deep experts, which is the first time I've ever been called that, I think. Our sponsor today for ALA on-air events are the great folks at Pantheon. Pantheon is a hosting service for Drupal and WordPress, and when I say hosting, you may think big generic server in the cloud, but no, Pantheon has this built-in system not just optimized for the server needs of Drupal or WordPress, but designed to make even the sysadmin tasks easy. One-click core updates, automatic backups, Git integration, caching. It's great. They're great. That's what the logo looks like. Sign up for one of their guided tours or create a free account and start poking around at pantheon.io. Yeah, so thanks everyone for watching. I'll be my name is Chris Coyier, and I'll be moderating the event, so hopefully just kind of ushering the conversation and getting other people to say smart things, which I know they will, because secret, we did a preparation panel for this a couple weeks ago, and it was so good, and I wish we recorded that also, because it was an amazing conversation. I work on a web app called CodePen, and I write about blogs, or write about the internet stuff at css-tricks.com, and have a podcast of my own called Shop Talk. But boring, boring, boring. Let's get into the far more interesting people. I'm going to introduce them quickly and then ask them an intimate question. Jina Bolton is here. Hi, Jina.
Hello.
Jina is a senior front-end designer on the design systems team at Salesforce, and if you haven't seen this, check it out. It's lightningdesignsystem.com. It's pretty impressive stuff. Maybe she'll mention that to us later. She also runs The Mixin, a San Francisco SaaS and front-end meetup, and leads the brand and web design stuff for SaaS, literally SaaS, like the CSS preprocessor. Jina, how do you spend your day as a front-end developer, like after the teeth brushing and the...
In addition to doing design and code for the design system that you mentioned, I spend a lot of time talking to designers and developers to kind of do that cyclical process of having the design system inform their design, but then also having their design inform our design system. So that's a lot of my day.
Oh, wonderful. We also have Una Kravets. Una, hello. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
That's a cool whiteboard behind you. It looks like you do lots of work during the day. Is there any secret stuff on there you forgot to erase?
I shouldn't be sitting here, but it's fine. Just ignore this.
Okay. Una is a front-end developer on the cloud platform team at IBM. She started the DC and Austin SaaS meetups and is a core member of the Open Design Foundation. Una, how are you productive during your day?
I feel like I do so many things. I sort of work in that intersection of design and engineering or development, sort of making sure that things run smoothly and work together. Right now I'm kind of doing what Jina does. I'm working on a style guide, so that's been a lot of back and forth.
Is it secret still?
It's just kind of a way to mesh these worlds and ideas of how this product should look and provide something that's performant, accessible, easy to work with. So that's the idea there. It's been a lot of back and forth and talking and figuring things out together.
That sounds like something a front-end developer would do. We also have Rebecca Murphey here. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, so good. Rebecca, you are a senior staff software engineer at Bazaar Voice and a creator of the JS Assessment Project, which maybe you could tell us what that is super quick, because I'm not even sure. Is it like questions maybe if you're going to, I don't know, maybe hire somebody in JavaScript?
It's all sorts of things. It's just a repo that I created a while ago, several years ago now, that people can use on their own to kind of get better at JavaScript, or you can use it as an interviewing tool. But it's just a test-driven tool for there are tests, and your job is to make them pass with JavaScript.
Oh, nice. Oh, like Jasmine?
Yeah, well, they're not Jasmine, but it's like Ruby cones or that kind of thing. So cool. It's fun.
How are you productive during your day at Bazaar Voice?
I ask myself that every day. Some days it's like, what did I do again? But officially, I'm the tech lead of a cross-functional product team of about 10 developers here at Bazaar Voice, and I do a lot of JavaScript development on that team. But I also spend a lot of time just talking to people throughout the whole Bizarre Voice organization about front-end development and how we can do it better and smarter and faster.
Fantastic. And our final panelist, Marco Rogers. How are you, Marco?
Good, good.
Good. Marco, you are the head of engineering at Clover Health. Also, Polo Tech on Twitter, you should definitely follow. Is an important man to follow on Twitter, in my opinion. Anyway, how are you productive at Clover Health?
Yeah, I was hoping I wouldn't have to like completely blow my cover really early, but I am an engineering manager these days, which means I don't write very much code. But basically, you know, I'm head of the engineering team, so I spend most of my time trying to figure out how to keep engineers happy and productive, and more importantly, how to help them grow as engineers. So, you know, at Clover, we're basically building better software for healthcare and health insurance. Which is really important because a lot of that software is not great. But you know, we have engineers who've been doing this for a long time and who are probably better than me, and ones who are like really just starting out. And so figuring out how to kind of put them on that growth path to becoming great engineers is what I've been thinking and spending a lot of my time on these days.
Nice, Marco. Just tossing around the word engineer right and left here. We're gonna get into that because that was part of some of the pre-show magic that we're gonna bring to you all very soon here. So we have at least half of this hour that we're gonna spend together at this wonderful Google Hangout talking about things within this panel, things that we think are interesting. This is the state of front-end development, after all. So we're gonna do that, and then hopefully field some questions. Hopefully from y'all or from the world about what you think about front-end development. So I thought this would be interesting. The front-end development is a massive subject. We're not even sure what falls into it, but if we thought of it as a bucket or an umbrella or something, what goes into it and what doesn't fall into it. So maybe we could start with some obvious ones and then start for some unobvious ones and see if they still fit into the bucket. So at a group, could you please respond to me yes or no if you think this thing that I say falls under the umbrella of front-end development? HTML.
Yes.
Yes.
Good start. CSS.
Yes.
Yes.
Everybody says yes. So HTML and CSS definitely front end topics. I'm nervous about the next one. Let's just say it. JavaScript.
Yeah.
I'd say yes easily, but there's a conversation to be had around that, I think.
Well, there sure is. And let's punt it just for a minute. Let's say configuring your gulp file JS on your project. Is that front end development?
I think so.
Me.
Maybe.
Oh, we got a bunch of groaning and maybes.
Yeah, so it gets complicated at that stage, I think. And you know, what is front end development, quote unquote? I guess the hesitation comes from the fact that I'm not sure people should feel like they have to be able to do all of that stuff.
But just under does it go under the umbrella or not?
I think it does.
Sure, but then like, well, I have a lot more absurd examples that I have to do, but I don't necessarily, like, they fall under my job as a front-end developer, but not.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway.
Environments efficient, and that's a big part of an efficient web development setup.
What about SAS, as in syntactically awesome style sheets that pre-process your CSS? Is that a front-end development thing?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes.
What about Haml then?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, man, I was ranting on Haml recently, so I should probably abstain.
Okay, just want to throw that out there. How about Python?
No.
No, probably not. Depends on where you work, but probably not.
Okay, and when I say Python, is the answer equally no to Ruby and PHP and things that are often in that same bucket?
I would agree. Yeah, same bucket.
And not even should you? What about? So this might be a can of worms too. But like, let's say you're working on a Ruby project, you should be able to work at the view layer, right? Like I have some data and I need to do something with it, right? But that's not the same. Would you say that's not the same as knowing Ruby?
Yeah, I've worked with the view layer quite frequently. I would consider that front end. Not so much.
On the
Rebecca,
other hand,
you got something here.
yeah,
Take it.
I'm sorry to interrupt. On the other hand, a project that I worked on for 18 months at always had no back end for all intents and purposes. Like, it was just a entirely client-side application, and there wasn't a server to worry about or understand. And,
But there was data, wasn't there?
There was data, but we didn't actually. We just consumed it. It was just JSON. We didn't really have to know a lot about how it was made.
Like, just listing things is all those things can be part of a front-end workflow and part of a front-end position, but are they requirements to be a front-end developer?
Right.
Well, requirements aside, we're just going to step in the bucket, and then we'll get into that. So how about this? How about is it optimizing your JPEGs and GIFs and PNGs? Is that a front-end developer job?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what about making sure that those assets are gzipped when they come down? Is that a front-end developer job?
I don't think so.
No.
I think that you better advocate for that, even if you don't do it yourself. You better make sure it gets done.
I would agree with that.
Yes.
Okay.
That's probably the best, most diplomatic way to.
Okay, so I like that this is in here, and we put this word in quotes, awareness. But so some of that that like we just got data, like Rebecca was saying, we got data, we don't even know or care where it came from, or I can work in the view layer of Ruby and stuff. You might call that like back-end awareness or server awareness. Is like, it's not your job to know it all or how it was created or what buckets it goes in when it leaves your hands necessarily, but is that awareness kind of thing a front-end developer?
I think absolutely, right. So I guess we definitely are going to kind of be in that gray area of, what is a front-end developer, and my personal feeling about it is that gray area is totally fine, right? Like, whether you're doing it or whether you're kind of working closely with engineers who work more in the web server layer to do it, like, it's kind of all part of getting things done. But in my experience, like, there's a point where you are going to want to have at least some control over the data that you're receiving. I think if you're building kind of non-trivial front-end applications. And so, that kind of firmly fits in that area for me. But I know some people may feel differently about it.
I think this all goes to, as soon as you leave HTML and CSS and start going further down the list, the more of these things the better you'll be at your job, and maybe the more jobs that you can get access to. But I would really, to that extent, I would almost agree with Jina that even JavaScript is not. You can absolutely get a job being a front-end developer with bare, basic understanding of JavaScript, or maybe even less than that. It's just the pool of jobs you can get is limited. And every single one of these things that you add, the more jobs you have access to.
But it's important to also understand where your product lives and understand the ecosystem behind how servers work, and the browser is an important part of sort of understanding how your product is going to be used and accessed by people.
So we have a yes on some server level back-end awareness, and then we already talked about the optimizing of assets, for example, just as one thing, because we might put that in a bucket of like network awareness, because it's certainly like a front-end task to like understand how the front end of a website like comes across the wires and ends up at a browser. So maybe it's not your specialty, but having some awareness of how that goes down, that's where are we saying yes, that's a front-end-ish?
I think so.
I'm gonna go with yes. What about knowing a bit of SEO, like what Google thinks is a good website? Is that a front end?
I think that's another thing where if that's a skill that you have, it will make you a more marketable developer. I don't know if it's I think it's a skill that typically falls under the front end heading, but you can get a job without it.
Mm-hmm.
You just get more jobs with it.
Front end heading, perhaps, because you take it, Marco.
It's kind of a question, right? But I can tell you that from experience, like, I've always been asked to do it in every single job, right? Like, so if experience says anything about it, then you just have to say yes. Like, you're gonna be asked to look into that.
And I would think there's some SEO things that are use this tag, have the HTML in this source order, don't use too much of this garbage, that kind of thing, which feels like that's HTML, and we already said HTML is front end. So perhaps this is another big umbrella, but let's just kind of get it out there. So our what we can talk about is bigger. UX. Is UX a front end developer concern?
It's a concern. I don't think it's a front end developer task.
Yeah, I think it's kind of falls into that awareness category we were talking about, but on a different side of the spectrum.
Okay. Okay.
I would do that.
And in this, perhaps the similar vein as SEO, well, I shouldn't have said that. It was a weird way to introduce this. Let's have it be its own category here. Accessibility.
I think that is an absolute requirement. I think
Wow.
it has
Anybody
to.
disagree with that?
I say yes.
I agree.
I would agree. The business may not agree, but I would agree.
Yeah.
And why is that, Rebecca? Because money, because time?
Because money and time. And I have, I'm uncomfortable as I'm even talking about this because it is terrible that this becomes a money question. But we spent months trying to make our third-party JavaScript application accessible, and we didn't do a lot of other things. And it was a real investment that we had to make, and from a pure business standpoint, it was morally right, but was it financially right? It's a hard thing to say.
Wow, and it perhaps was hard to get data on whether it was or wasn't, or that it wasn't.
I mean, I think I could talk about this a lot. I think it's a really important skill, and it's a really important thing for people to be aware of. Again, do you have to be an expert at it to go get a job? Maybe not, but it should be. In some ways, it's almost like the GZIP thing, right? Like, it should be a thing that you're asking about and advocating for, and certainly there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in accessibility land that you should be advocating for and just making sure you're doing as a matter of course.
So maybe this awareness quotes is there's back-end awareness, server awareness, network awareness, SEO awareness, UX awareness, accessibility awareness. Yeah, that's fun. I promise we'll stop after this, but what about like Canvas or SVG?
It depends on the job. Front-end development is so big, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because it encompasses so many things. You could have different specialties within it. And ideally, if you work in a company that can hire multiple front-end developers, you could have them sort of specialize in different flavors of front-end development and then work together, have your own specialty, and just grow off each other and learn and build. That's ideal.
Okay, so our umbrella we've established is very wide, and we kind of, I think as a group, wanted to make that point because of how strange it is that front-end development not so long ago perhaps was a specialty, and now it's like, what even is it? So that brings us into this is a classic discussion, and a lot of people, it's tinder for a fire, but job titles in the world of front-end development. And so there's a bunch of them, and I'll just name some. Front-end designer, front-end developer, front-end engineer, these type of things. Sure.
Designer.
Yeah. Visual designer, and there's so many of them. So if we took one that says that, the title of this panel is the state of front-end development. So the job title that goes with that is front-end developer. Is it meaningful anymore? Does it say enough all by itself to understand what that job's going to be about?
I would say the point that's important to make here is that when, like, today, the state of what happens on the front end today, when you read job titles, you can't actually get a sense for what they want you to do. You have to learn more to find out what a job actually is, because the lines are so blurry, and there's so much there.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that on the one hand, it's really exciting that front-end developer has become this profession unto itself. When I was starting, it was not a role that had as much credibility as I think it has now. I think it has so much more credibility now. But I agree with Marco that you you just don't know what someone means when they say it. Just like the list of things we went down, some people mean all of those things. Oh, and you also better know Java. And some people really just want you to do more on the design side, and they don't expect you to be implementing SEO strategies or getting in the Ruby views, those sorts of things. So
front-end developers become like the webmaster. Maybe front-end we're calling ourselves.
I think
So on the topic of titles, this is a really interesting one because I remember the point where I wanted to call myself a front-end developer, but would not like answer to webmaster or like look at any of those. Like it has evolved, I think, to a certain extent.
it definitely has. When I was at Apple, my job title when I first started out there was front-end developer. Would I call myself that now? No, because it's become such a different thing. Like I learned HTML, CSS. I never learned JavaScript, but I knew enough to work around it. Now, like if we're talking about job titles, if when I hear front-end developer, I'm going to assume that you know a lot more than me about.
So what about, okay, so is it fair to say, Jina, that you straight up don't call yourself a front-end developer?
Not anymore. I used to. I don't anymore.
Wow. So have removed yourself from the circle of front-end developer. What if I said, Jina, are you a front-end designer? Would you take that?
Yeah, and you actually introduced me that way, which I thought was interesting because I would potentially
Really?
say yes, even though that's not technically my title now. Because then that kind of gives insight into that I'm a lot more focused on the design side of things, but I'm still doing HTML and CSS to build my UI.
Mm-hmm.
I think the flexibility of it. To me, front-end development is a front-end developer is just a problem solver who uses web technologies to solve those problems or to build with. And that I like having flexibility to be able to sort of go into a new language or a new field or idea that's still this idea of problem solving on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that we didn't put into the bucket yet, but we could. Is is Photoshop, is Sketch, is Illustrator, is Affinity Designer, the knowledge of those tools part of the front-end development bucket. I think maybe the day that the world split between back-end developer and front-end developer, certainly those tools would have went with the front-end side. But does it anymore, or is that yet another third branch?
This is why I feel like I'm extremely comfortable with Jina calling herself a front-end developer because there is a wide range of skills and all of them are valuable in order to get the thing done, right? And so like for me, like my relationship with Photoshop is like I can like open it and cut images out of it. You know what I mean? But like still, I need someone to be able to work with me to do that work. And we can both be front-end developers because we're both required to get the thing done, and like I'm comfortable with that. And so I just don't, I think this is kind of an interesting conversation, but I want to be clear that like it doesn't even really pay to try to draw boxes around these things.
Yeah, and I think that I'm kind of on the opposite end of this, where front-end developer, it's a role that there was a tweet the other day that mentioned that we were talking about before the show too, and that I retweeted about how front-end developers
You should read it. Read it out loud.
Oh, well, that would mean I would have to have it in front of me to read it out loud.
Do you need me to read it?
Yes, you read it, and then I'll talk about it.
It said, front-end developer is a job title that spans people who could barely use jQuery to people who could recreate it. This is a big issue.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that this is a big issue part of it, but I think it's like such a good encapsulation of the problem that this term has kind of lost a lot of meaning, and I'm at a point where I'm kind of wary of a front-end developer job. When an employer reaches out to me and says, "Hey, do you want to be a front-end developer on our team?" It's like what I do now is so different from what I did a few years ago when I would have used this front-end developer term that I kind of stray away from. I don't know what to call myself instead, but front-end developers doesn't seem right either. It seems like it's going to actually really limit the kinds of things I get to work on if that's the title that I have. And I'm with Una that this is about, I know how to solve problems using web technology. The end.
Interesting. So I wonder if that's going to lead us into a discussion about maybe not the titles not mattering so much as the descriptions and the actual like what you do for work. But let's move to this just for a moment. There's probably people out there who want to be front-end developers. I'm sure some portion of the people listening into this are interested in the role of front-end developer, want to know more about it, and thinking, what is it? Can I be one of these things? And let's roll with that for a bit. What type of person is good for this? Rebecca, you said that people that what you do now is totally different than you did 2 years ago. Do you think that factors in? Do you need to be willing to reinvent yourself every 2 years to be a front-end developer?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I was working on something over the weekend that was like, I did not know how to do this 2 years ago. Like what I just did, this was scary and intimidating to me 2 years ago, and now I'm just doing it like on a Sunday afternoon and not really thinking about it. I think you have to constantly be, learning new things, and that has to be exciting to you, and you have to be okay with not knowing everything. You have to kind of accept that there will always be people better than you, and there will always be people who you have stuff to teach. And just be comfortable in this constant state of learning.
I think a good front-end developer is always embarrassed from the code that they wrote even 6 months ago, and I think it's a great thing.
Like, I'm embarrassed of the code I wrote yesterday. So.
Marco, when was the last time your job changed in a significant way? Was it like last year, last month, 3 years ago?
Well, again, like I said, I've been an engineering manager for a bit, and this is a tangent, not totally germane to this conversation, but going from being a developer to being a manager is a job change. It is a career change, and people should think of it that way. But I won't spend too much time on that soapbox. So just in the realm of front-end development, I would say that I actually kind of got into it from the opposite direction, right? Rather than kind of being interested in front-end development generally, I got into JavaScript, right? Like I kind of learned JavaScript as a language, and I was doing it. I was actually doing JavaScript on the server in 2005 before it was cool, right? And we were kind of on the JVM and using Rhino, and like it was this kind of weird proprietary thing that they had built at the job that I worked at, and I really liked JavaScript as a language, and so even when I left that job, I was kind of looking for more opportunities to do JavaScript, and then like the front end was the place where you got to write JavaScript all the time. So then that was kind of my intro to being like, okay, what is front end development? How do I do that?
Nice. You knew what you liked and then sought out more of that. I think Jina, you've mentioned that same kind of thing before, right?
Yeah, it's kind of thing you discover as you go, since the field is so big. And it's important not to sort of go into it thinking, I need to learn Angular or I need to learn React. It's more important to sort of understand like the MVC model and understand why you're solving a problem in certain ways instead of just thinking very narrow-mindedly about specific technologies, which, like we said, change every 6 months.
Wouldn't it be rare to read a job posting that said, I want somebody who's willing to reinvent themselves every 2 years and understands the underlying concepts of who just generally knows MVC. Like, you're never going to read that, right?
It's like we need SQL, Angular, Ruby work.
But I think that's a problem with the ads as much as anything. Like the people buying developers, the people who are hiring developers, they don't know what they want either, and they haven't really distilled this down to these fundamental concepts and these fundamental skills and attitudes that you have to have. And I was talking with a manager at another company recently, and he was saying, we really found that we need a manager who understands front end and understands UI development.
Yes.
Because back-end manager, people who are used to managing back-end developers, they don't even know how to manage this. So I think that change has to happen at the same time we're talking about this. The people doing the hiring have to be thinking a little bit differently about the real fundamentals they're looking for.
The other problem with hiring is oftentimes you just tell a hiring manager, hey, we need front-end developers, and they try to Google what that means, write something in the job description, match up with what their employees are doing. And that's where you get this confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually a topic that's pretty important to me too. So in my last role, I was director of front end engineering, and we had other kind of teams with functional expertise. Like we had the web layer and APIs, and they worked in Ruby and Rails, and we had core services, and they did like the Java and JVM stuff. But the front end team, like people would kind of be talking to me about what skills you need to be on the front end team, and there was like like people felt weird that I couldn't give them like the straight answer, right? Because there was like we had to go through this whole spectrum that we've been talking about of like, okay, I need people who like just kind of know JavaScript really well, and I need the HTML and CSS people, and it was also kind of a source of tension sometimes for the devs on my team, because they were kind of given expectations by other people that like you can do the whole spectrum of front end things, and I had to kind of constantly try to convince people that that's actually just not possible, right? Like here are the people who do this kind of stuff, and here are the people who do this, and together we do all the things, right? But
right, I like that's why you build a team in the first place. When I was on the front end engineering team at Apple, I was the least engineering person on that team, but I knew how to do HTML, CSS, and how to architect the like files, like how it's organized and all that stuff. But then we'd have somebody who I work very closely with who's incredibly strong at JavaScript, like is the type of person that could write his own jQuery. And so by having people on different sides of the spectrum, we can work together. So I think that's like what I would ideally do if I were to build my own front-end team, is try to have people, like obviously you're going to have some generalists, but try to get people that are like just incredibly strong at architecture, incredibly strong at understanding accessibility, or we mentioned SVGs, things like that. So it's going to make an awesome team.
So did those people start as, well, who knows how they started, right? But we have this concept of maybe when you're really early, you're a baby front-end developer, and you're learning stuff, and you're learning little bits and pieces. You're for sure learning HTML and CSS, because we pinned those down as pretty fundamental front-end developer things. And then you reach what we might consider the midpoint of your learning as being a front-end developer. Is it at that point that it's like might be a good idea to become a specialist in one of those things, like you were saying, Jina, becoming a architectural specialist, or you think that's like a good move, or do you just do what the job requires? Or
I think it's up to you. Like you might enjoy being a generalist and stay that way, or maybe you just figure out you just really love SVGs and that's all you want to do all day.
I also think you don't have to be intentional about this. Like I didn't set out to, I'm going to be good at architecture. I think that it just kind of, for me at least, maybe it's different for other people, but for me it just kind of emerged that I'm good at architecture, and please don't make me make something that actual users have to use in a user interface sort of way. Like, please, I'm
which
terrible
is
at
different
that.
than Marco. As Marco said, I'm writing JavaScript on the server. I like it. Please, I want to continue doing this. Please give me a job where I can keep doing it.
And in the same vein, though, so getting into front-end development and calling myself a front-end developer, and I learned kind of the HTML and CSS as well, but when it got to that designy part and people were like, hey, can you make it look pretty? I'm like, no, I can't.
Nope.
That's not
Don't do it.
That's where I would come in.
Yeah.
Well, you can't become a master of something or a specialist if you're not good at it. You can't just do it because it's what something tells you to do. You discover it as you go.
Let's bring a new word into this thing, and we have a question from Vito Go, who writes here: front-end developers are usually associated with being a jack of all trades, but master of none. Do you think that being a front-end developer should try focusing on a single area where she is most strong at? So it's the same thing we were just talking about, but what do you think of this jack of all trades? Can jack of all trades be your specialty? I know that's weird to say, but
I think the jack of all trades is the awareness of all of the parts of front end, but you can always be a point person for a specific technology or a specific aspect of front end development in your work.
And a lot of my role these days is not to know how to do everything, but it's to know all the things that need to be done, and to know the questions to ask, and then to point a specialist maybe and say, hey, can you go figure out how to actually do this thing? But I know that we need to think about it.
Project level awareness.
Yeah, and so I think that's where being a jack of all trades. I think being a jack of all trades comes in when you're starting out. It's really good to try lots of things and see where your specialty is. After that midpoint you were talking about, I think it makes a lot of sense to specialize and continue to specialize, but broaden that awareness word that we keep using.
I like it.
As you focus on your specialty. Some people call it T-shaped skills, which is like such a managey thing to say, but
well, I mean, it means
you're right about that because I was also gonna.
I beat you to it. Sorry, Marco.
If I was weighing in here, what I would say is that developers in particular, we have this kind of really awesome luxury in that we can actually have some say over what kind of job we do. In most places, when you go in and they give you a job, you can't say, like, I don't do this, I only do that. Like, that's not really a thing, right? And so in a lot of ways, I think people should take advantage of this luxury by having an opinion on the kind of things that they feel like they want to get good at and going deep into that, or being the best kind of version of that they can be, and that includes whether you want to dive deep and be like just like that really awesome JavaScript engineer, or whether you want to be that really awesome front-end designer who can kind of run circles with CSS and HTML and also kind of put it into a nice design and UX. Like, those things are highly valuable, and it really depends on like finding the job that's going to let you do that, because they're like across the board, people need these skills, and you can find that role, but you have to look. We were kind of talking about the job descriptions, and like you have to find out if that's the role that they need, because the area is so kind of gray today. But yeah, all of those things are hugely valuable today. So I don't even know that it pays to kind of try to pin it down, like I said.
When we had here at IBM, we sort of split up this front-end developer into places on the spectrum. So there are different types of front-end developer that just fall in different places along that design through engineering back-end spectrum.
This is related to this, and I think it's very interesting. So far, we've been talking about what is front-end development and the particular skills and stuff, but we haven't talked so much about what is it like to be that job in the context of the organization you're at, and we're all from very different contexts. Marco at Clover, Una at IBM, Rebecca at Bizarre Voice, and Jina at Salesforce, and I'm like on a tiny little team of my own little devising. We all come from very different sizes and scopes of places. So Christopher Jones writes in, what is the difference in responsibilities with working at a small shop, a medium shop, or a giant enterprise, mega multinational corp? Is the job still the same, or does even the job change a bunch?
That's another one of those it depends questions. I've been on small teams, big teams, small companies, big companies, startups, agencies, enterprise. It's all different. And even comparing like one startup to another, it's just all different. I've been the sole front-end person plus sole interaction designer, so I was doing a little bit of everything. When I was at Apple, I was on the front-end team, so all I did was write HTML and CSS, and I missed doing design, so I had to move to the design team to do design. The team I'm on now is really awesome. The role that I have didn't really exist the way that it exists now at the time, but I knew what I wanted to do. Now we have a team of people doing it, and it just came about of knowing what you want to do. Like in my case, I love style guides. I love design systems. I just chose to work on it, and now we're working on it, which is awesome.
Chose your own destiny there, which is fun.
Yeah.
And also, just because you work at a huge company doesn't mean that you're on a big team.
Right.
Exactly. My team is actually pretty small.
Yeah, and there are also huge companies that still have teams that have just one front-end developer on them. They have a product team with one front-end developer. I think that's not a reasonable thing, but it doesn't
yeah,
happen.
I wouldn't recommend that.
Right, but it happens.
I love this one by Anastasia Lanz on Twitter. Should front-end developers have 3 monitors?
What? I have 3 monitors. I love it.
How many monitors does it take to be a front end?
I think all developers should have at least 2 monitors.
Yes.
And,
Wait, does your laptop count as one, or is that?
it can, I guess,
Yeah,
if you know, if you want to.
laptop counts as one.
All right. I only have 2. A 3 might be a lot.
Max Pshenskiov, sorry, Max is a professional HTML and CSS person. He considers that part of his profession, and he's good at responsive web design, but not so much JavaScript, and he thinks the word front-end developer means Angular, Ember, React. You know, I think there's lots of people like that. You just name the technologies right now, and that's the requirement right now to call yourself FED. Are we rejecting that as a concept? Or?
I think that's the problem that happens when you read job descriptions super closely and use that as a basis of what you're going to learn. There's nobody that's going to be using every single one of those technologies at a position, probably, unless you're teaching it.
There was a really cool thing from, I was on a panel at CSS DevConf, and I forgot who said it, so I apologize to whoever said it. But they said that the job listing of all the things that they want is just a wish list. It's not a list of requirements. It's really a wish list. And I thought that was really cool.
But I think it's an interesting question, like, what should you call yourself when you're really good at HTML, CSS, and responsive design? Like, what is that? What is it, a front-end developer role? Should you put that, and will you be discounted if you put that and you don't have Ember and Angular? I think that's the thing this person's worrying about. Is like, what do I call myself that people will respond to and not have wrong expectations of me?
I feel like I struggle with this all the time. Like this whole, I don't really do any visual design. So am I a designer when my specialty is really like working with HTML and CSS? And I use JavaScript, but I wouldn't say I specialize in that compared to other things. But then I think I'm a front-end developer. I don't think I'm an engineer, but I'm not a designer. It's just.
Does it give you anxiety or not? You feel fairly?
She looks a little anxious.
You do, but
it's because it's so.
Your work speaks for itself, though. You're confident. You are doing good work and have a good job and stuff. I'm not to say that you don't deserve to be anxious sometimes, but do you? There's a question that goes along with this. Is the idea of feeling overwhelmed? So Jim Webb writes in, how do you personally learn about new tools and frameworks without feeling overwhelmed? It seems like every month brings a hot new JavaScript build tool or application framework. It's easy to feel like you're not good unless you already know it. So I know tons of people feel like there's jokes right and left out about it. You can't go to a conference without somebody making a bunch of jokes about there's days until last JavaScript framework dropped and it's always 1, or whatever. Does it matter? Because it you can't just say it absolutely doesn't matter, because it is breeding anxiety in this industry a bit about not knowing those things.
This is why the concepts are the most important thing, and then choosing technology as that becomes a problem that you need to solve in your work.
Yeah, I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that you kind of have to survive in this field, you have to be okay with not knowing everything. It's important to be aware. We keep using that word, aware of these things, but I learned to be okay with not knowing all this. And I think a lot of it is just make sure that you are working with new technologies frequently, but don't feel like you have to work with every new technology that comes out. But just the practice of working with some new technology on a regular basis will make you good at working with other new technologies in the future.
So is it because you're a good problem solver then? Can you, Lindsay Lee, shoot, it scrolled away from me. Lindsay Lee Silvio Vana, I'm sorry. When looking to hire someone for a developer type role, would you agree that the ability to solve problems with technology is as important as knowing a bullet point list of languages? Someone might code well but not know how to apply them to solve a problem. So, can you?
This is a kind of a really important question, right? And I guess I'm learning a lot. Over the last several months, I've been having similar conversations with people and not really understanding that this is a source of anxiety for some people, where they're like, are my skills the ones that are actually in demand, right? Like it's really kind of eye-opening for me. I've talked to those people who kind of said, I've kind of gone really deep in Angular, and like I know Angular, and like that'll kind of get me a job. And there are places where kind of knowing Angular really well will get you a job, but when if you were to kind of say come and apply for a role with me, I'm going to say, well, the team's using, React. Like, are you cool with that? And like that's where you want to be. You want to be able to say, oh, I've been doing Angular for 6 months, but if I had to switch to React, yeah, I think I can handle that. There will be some learning process, but yeah, it's all the same stuff, right? Like underneath, like you're doing the same thing and building out kind of front end capabilities. And so when we talk about like having that foundation, that's really what it's about, is kind of knowing the foundation of how the browser works, how the web works, and then that will give you the basis that you need to learn any of the new technologies that are popping up, because they're just not doing different things, right? Like the browser really only kind of does what it does, and then you can put a bunch of stuff on top of it to make it look different, but it's the same stuff. It's DOM, it's CSS, it's also all the same stuff.
I think too that these frameworks mean that a lot of these other skills become more important, because the frameworks take away a lot of the complexity, and once you learn one, then you learn another, and then you learn another, and then you start to see how they're a lot the same. But there are things that they don't solve for you, like perhaps how you do your builds, or how you write tests, which we haven't talked about at all, or how do you engineer for performance, and how do you do accessibility. All these things that there are so many things that frameworks don't answer for us still. They answer a ton of things, but having that broad set of skills becomes valuable in the framework world.
Yeah, and the question had asked, oh, sorry.
Right. I would just say, like, the ability and desire to pick up these new skills and concepts as you go is, I think, the most valuable thing that a front-end developer can bring to a company.
So let's go on that for a minute. Is how can you interview someone and get the correct answer to that question? Do you think a good interviewer can figure out if someone's a good problem solver?
I like to ask how they learn and where they learn, and if they can come up with a bunch of answers to where they're getting their new technology information from, it shows me that they care and that they're interested in it, like, legitimately and sincerely.
You've done some interviewing, right, Rebecca? How do you look for that?
Yeah, we absolutely look for that. We look for how people approach a problem, and we've actually been switching to more of a take-home exercise approach rather than a stand in front of a whiteboard and write some code for me approach, to try and let people have a more realistic experience and let us see what they do in a more realistic environment. Yeah, we try to give them a real problem to solve. And then see how they approach it and see how they think about it. And we're having some success with that. It's a little bit early to tell.
I would agree. So we switched to kind of doing take-home exercises a while back, and I would highly recommend it for anybody who is interviewing. It does a lot to eliminate that kind of performance anxiety of coming in and performing code on a whiteboard in front of people. Like, this, not everybody's going to be good at that, and I think the traditional interview kind of optimizes for people who have gotten good at that. But I would echo what Rebecca's saying. Absolutely, like we want to try to evaluate for people who have that learning ability and that adaptability. Like, I've interviewed a lot, and none of them test for like frameworks. Like none of it.
Oh, and really? So that's actually kind of a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you tell me that you're an expert in a framework, then the first question I'm going to ask you is, what are its shortcomings? Because I want to know that you've thought critically about this and not just jumped on a bandwagon, but that you've thought critically about it and you can see its flaws and you can tell me where it shines too. We definitely don't talk about frameworks here when we're doing the interviewing.
I apologize, but I have to be that person who runs and gets the power cord because I'm gonna run out of service. Sorry.
How many power cables does it take?
I already just asked me to bring me one.
That's good. It's worth it. So one of the things that it's just a fun little hot topic that we could bring up is the idea of junior versus senior versus whatever's in the middle of that. Is there I don't know. What is like the moment which you become senior, or is it 100% arbitrary?
Maybe a little bit of both.
That's what you want. You want somebody who can extend their expertise onto others and become a multiplier.
Is that it? Is that the thing? Like, if you only get to be senior and once you've leveled up your ability to teach?
Yeah, I think I used to work at a company called Viget, and something they looked for when I hired was people who are good educators of others. I really liked that approach to looking at front-end development, especially senior positions.
Yeah, I think Jina's word of being a multiplier is a huge thing. And I would also say that even when I don't know, I have senior in my title, but there are so many ways that I don't feel senior. The more senior you get, the more you realize how many people are still better and smarter than you, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So let's go with this. Like, I think we should broach salary, but compared to, rather than an exact number for now, how much more money valuable do you think a senior person is compared to a junior person? Is it like a 2x kind of scenario, or or is that too uncomfortable to talk about?
I live in a weird city to talk salary because people make a ridiculous amount here in San Francisco.
So but that's why we'll use a multiplier instead of a number.
I'm not actually sure what the multiplier should be.
I feel like this always shuts people down a lot.
Look at the value of the work. A senior developer who's teaching others and becoming a multiplier is extremely valuable in a lot of ways.
Right.
Yeah, I just walked back into this conversation, but I obviously have a lot of opinions.
We're all just naming our salary, Mark. You're last.
I did that. I did that last year. There was this whole talk pay thing on Twitter. It made people really extremely uncomfortable, but I think it's important to talk in real terms about salaries. I'll try to answer your question as a hiring manager. It's not going to be 2x. But it is going to be a significant difference in salary if you can demonstrate that you have not only kind of senior technical capabilities, but that you can be that force multiplier, that you're going to make everyone else around you better. You're going to do that mentoring. You're going to provide that leadership and direction on the team. Those are highly valuable, and I think people kind of deserve to be compensated for that, because not just because it's valuable to the company, but you want people to aspire to be that, right? Like, you want everyone kind of saying, like, how can I actually be a multiplier on my team? And that is going to bring rewards. So I think it's really important.
I love that we're using the word multiplier a lot. And so if anybody's confused by that, what are we saying exactly when you say multiplier?
Well, so the way that I define it is, what I talked early on about how I see my role, my job, as how do I put engineers on a growth path? How do I build a team that is super effective, and that tomorrow we're going to be more effective than we were yesterday because everybody's kind of learning and growing. Continuing to learn and grow as an engineer is just not a trivial thing, particularly in front end, because we've talked about how the pace of things is moving so quickly. So when I talk about being a force multiplier, what I mean is the people who kind of can grasp these concepts really quickly and then help bring other people along in doing that, right? So there's a thing where you can have the really smart person that goes off in a corner and they kind of build tools and then kind of deliver them to the rest of the team to use. Or you have that person who kind of goes and connects with the team and says, hey, let's really learn how to do this stuff in React, right? Let's really learn how to develop these patterns, right? Doing code reviews for people, pairing with people, and creating more engineers that can actually be kind of fully independent and autonomous. You know, I have people on my team, like I said, who this is their like first engineering job ever, right? And part of my role and the role of the team is to provide them an environment where they're growing. Like 6 months from now, they should be teaching other people, right? And so people who enable that growth are really valuable, and like those people, they should, you know, that's just kind of how you should look at it, is their force multiplier.
And maybe even reaching out to designers and teaching them how to code and becoming an enabler of other people around you. The best way to grow a technical community is to introduce it to non-technical people. And there you're even growing past your little community of friends developers. You're becoming somebody who's multiplying across the company.
Can you be senior and still have imposter syndrome? Or do you have to?
Absolutely.
You have to battle that. Okay.
Also, I don't think you have to be senior to be a multiplier as well. You could do that at any point. You can always make your community around you better. That's not really, like, the job title is not a requirement. We kind of talked about how job titles in this whole session are a little arbitrary in this field.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I guess the point that I'm trying to make that I think is a really important distinction is being that force multiplier is a requirement for senior, right? Like it's not just the like deep technical knowledge, right? Like you know, a person can be senior on my team even if they're not like rebuilding jQuery. Like that's just not what it's about. It's about being like having that impact on the rest of the team and the rest of the org, and that's really important. And you don't have to have kind of the deep technical knowledge to do that.
Very, very good. So nobody thinks here that being senior means 5 years. Nobody thinks that.
I hate those things so much.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's tied to a time frame at all.
Interesting.
When it comes to like being able to pick up skills, you don't just because you can pick it up in a month. I think that makes you a better front-end developer than somebody who needs to take the 5 years to pick up that skill.
I want to say I don't think that there's a 5 years check I'm senior, but I do think that there is some amount of experience that you can't cram. You can't get it in a month. And having that experience and having that perspective and being able to say, like, I remember 2 years ago when I tried this thing that you're talking about, it didn't go well, and here's why. Some of that you just can't cram that into a month or 6 months or a year. And I think that a lot of times when people come to me and say, like, how do I get better at JavaScript? How do I get better at front-end development? It's like, it just takes time. It takes time and experience and learning things and failing, and you can't do that in a month.
Yeah, I would agree with that, actually. That's a great point.
I would agree with that. I do think when I say experience, though, it's less about kind of time worked, and it's more about like the actual things that you've kind of built and shipped.
Right.
So I'm very much kind of in that camp where there's 5 years of experience kind of doing the same kinds of things, and you haven't learned a whole lot outside of that box that you've been in, and there's like a year of kind of really intense and dynamic environment where you've learned a ton and you've had a lot of failures, and like you come out of that being a lot more experienced than if you had kind of stayed in a certain space for a long time.
For sure.
There was a question in here that as we come to wrapping up a little bit, that asked us to kind of revisit that list of things. When we started this whole thing out as, let's talk about the umbrella or the bucket or whatever, that kind of turned into a swimming pool of things that are all front-end development. The only ones that were 100% agreed upon really were HTML and CSS, and then it branched out from there to things like design and JavaScript and pre-processing and build tools and back-end technologies. And then we started talking about this concept of awareness, like server awareness and network awareness and accessibility awareness, or maybe not even awareness for that one. There's a lot of questions in here that are saying accessibility is not an optional skill in here. So just to give the community more of a voice there, I think a lot of people feel pretty strongly about that one, and good on you. There might even be kind of legality awareness that goes with that, and then we started about testing. We didn't even touch DevOps. We barely touched testing. So there's this swimming pool of stuff that's all kind of lives under front-end development, and job titles are failing us, job descriptions are failing us in a way. I don't mean to sound too negative about all this, because certainly people are working and getting paid and work is getting done, so maybe it's just a conversational weakness. But I thought we could perhaps do final thoughts on some of that, if you all have any dying things you have left to say.
Seems like friend development is just like finding Nemo, you know, you just gotta just keep swimming.
That's so good.
Yeah, I guess in a way you can kind of look at it as like talking about photography. You've got film photography, you've got digital photography, you have phone photography. Like, it's just, there's so many ways you can take it, but you would still consider yourself a photographer, I guess, no matter which route you take. So, I don't know. It's just one big giant pool. I like that metaphor.
I think I would say just be patient with yourself. I don't know. This it's a long road and it doesn't end, which is really exciting and fun.
Sounds like a Grateful Dead song or something.
But yeah, just be patient with yourself and help the people around you, and you will get better.
Absolutely.
Marco?
Yeah, so final thoughts. I guess for me, it's kind of acknowledging that the space of front-end development is kind of exploding right now. It's a really exciting time to kind of be in this space, and I think people should kind of embrace how dynamic it is and how in demand it is, and just really kind of find where you fit, right? Like there's really no rules for this. If there's nothing else you got out of this, there's no rules for this. Like, the thing that you like to do in the front end is valuable. Like, learn it and then go find the people who are gonna pay you money to do that, because this is the time.
Yes.
Great final message. Thank you, viewers. Thanks to everybody who tuned in and listened and is listening later on YouTube or wherever this thing gets syndicated to. We didn't even talk about RSS. That's important, right?
I forgot all about RSS.
It's like Twitter. Mark your calendars for December 2nd. Captain Jeffrey Zeldman is gonna. I should say Dr. Zeldman, because he's bringing back Ask Dr. Web, which predates probably anybody in here. I'm aware that he did it, but we're all too new school for that stuff. But he's going to be reprising that for a special Q&A event called Ask Dr. Web coming up December 2nd. Watch for updates. They're going to add the video of today's panel in the next couple of days with a complete transcript of all this for accessibility reasons and SEO reasons. The thing. Thanks to Pantheon, that's the logo for them. I hope it's the right corner. I'm going to point to that one just in case there's some weird flip thing that happens. But they're the hosting sponsor for all of this. Check them out at pantheon.io. Thanks to Jina, Marco, Rebecca, Yuna. That was a really excellent talk. So hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.